The morning sun painted the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold, but Maya couldn't see the beauty anymore. She had stopped noticing sunrises 3 years ago, around the same time her father's words had become sharper than the winter wind that swept across their family ranch. "Maya, get those feed buckets to the barn, and try not to scare the cattle with that face of yours," Robert called out from the porch, his coffee mug steaming in the crisp air. Maya's hands tightened around the metal handles, 26 years old, and she still felt like that little girl who used to run to her mother crying after her father's comments. But Mama wasn't here anymore to smooth things over with gentle words and warm hugs. The cattle knew her better than any human ever would. As she approached the fence, the cows gathered around, recognizing the woman who had cared for them since she was tall enough to reach over the rails. These animals didn't care that her nose was too wide or that her shoulders were broader than her younger sisters. They just knew she brought food and spoke to them with kindness. "Morning, ladies," Maya whispered to the herd, pouring grain into their troughs. "At least you all think I'm beautiful, right?" A gentle brown cow nuzzled her shoulder, and Maya smiled for the first time that day. Animals had always been easier than people. They didn't judge. They didn't compare her to magazine covers or movie stars. They just accepted love when it was offered. The sound of heels clicking on gravel made Maya look up. Her sister Lily was walking toward the main house, dressed in a flowing sundress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a fashion catalog. Even at 7 in the morning, Lily looked perfect. Her blonde hair caught the light just right, and her delicate features were exactly the kind that made men stop and stare. "Maya, have you seen my sunglasses?" Lily called out, not bothering to come closer to the fence where Maya stood covered in dust and hay. "Check the kitchen counter," Maya replied, wiping her hands on her jeans. Lily wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, you smell like the barn. Maybe take a shower before breakfast? Dad's having coffee with the Johnson family, and their son might stop by." Maya had heard this song before. Another eligible bachelor, another opportunity for Lily to charm someone new, another reminder that Maya was the sister who stayed in the background. "I'll shower after I finish the morning chores," Maya said quietly. "Suit yourself," Lily shrugged, already losing interest. "But honestly, Maya, you could at least try to look presentable. You never know when you might meet someone." Maya watched her sister glide toward the house, moving like she owned the world. And maybe she did. Maybe when you looked like Lily, the world really did belong to you. The ranch house sat on 200 acres of prime Montana land, rolling hills that stretched toward mountains in the distance. Maya's great-grandfather had built this place with his own hands, and 4 generations of her family had worked the soil. Every fence post, every barn board, every inch of pasture held memories. But memories didn't pay bills. Maya made her way to the small office space in the barn, where she kept the ranch's financial records. The numbers on the computer screen told a story she didn't want to read. Feed costs were up, cattle prices were down. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and they were 3 months behind. She pulled out a calculator and ran the numbers again, hoping she'd made a mistake. But math didn't lie. Unlike the cheerful face she put on every morning, the ranch was failing. Robert had never been good with money. He was the kind of man who believed hard work alone could solve any problem. But hard work couldn't fix market, prices or drought conditions, or the fact that bigger ranches were pushing smaller operations out of business. Maya had taken over the books 5 years ago after Mama died. She'd taught herself accounting from library books and YouTube videos, staying up late into the night trying to make sense of spreadsheets and tax forms. She'd found ways to cut costs, negotiated better deals with suppliers, even started a small side business, selling homemade preserves at the farmer's market. But it wasn't enough. The bank had sent another letter yesterday. Maya had hidden it from her father, just like she'd hidden the last 3. Robert's pride was fragile enough without knowing how close they were to losing everything. "Maya!" Her father's voice boomed across the yard. "Get in here." She saved the spreadsheet and walked toward the house, steeling herself for whatever mood she'd find him in today. Robert was sitting at the kitchen table with Tom Johnson and his wife, their coffee cups creating rings on Mama's good tablecloth. The Johnsons are thinking about expanding their operation, Robert said without looking at Maya. Tom here might be interested in leasing some of our pasture land. Maya's heart jumped. Leasing land could bring in enough money to make the next few mortgage payments. She sat down at the table, her mind already calculating numbers. What kind of lease terms were you thinking? Maya asked Tom directly. Robert shot her a sharp look. Maya, why don't you go help Lily with breakfast? The men are talking business here. Heat crept up Maya's neck. She knew more about this ranch's finances than anyone in the room. But her father still treated her like a child who couldn't understand grown-up conversations. Actually, Tom said slowly, I'd like to hear what Maya thinks. She's got a reputation around here for being smart about ranch management. Robert's jaw tightened. Maya's good with the books, but she doesn't understand the bigger picture. This is man's work. Dad, Maya said quietly, I think we should hear what Mr. Johnson has in mind. Any additional income could really help us right now. Help us with what? Robert's voice rose. This ranch has been in our family for 4 generations. We don't need help from anyone. Tom and his wife exchanged glances. Maya could see them reassessing the situation, probably wondering if they wanted to do business with a family that couldn't even agree among themselves. Maybe we should discuss this another time, Tom said, standing up. When you've had a chance to think things over. After the Johnsons left, Robert turned on Maya with a fury she hadn't seen since Mama's funeral. You embarrassed me in front of Tom Johnson, he said, his voice low and dangerous. A man doesn't want to hear business advice from a woman who looks like she should be working in the fields, not sitting at the negotiating table. The words hit Maya like physical blows. She'd heard variations of this speech her entire life, but it never got easier. I was just trying to help, she whispered. Help? Robert laughed bitterly. Maya, you're 26 years old and you've never even been on a proper date. You spend your days talking to cows and your nights staring at computer screens. Do you think that's the kind of woman who knows how to handle men like Tom Johnson? Maya felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. Crying would only make things worse. Your mother used to worry about you. Robert continued, settling back into his chair. She used to say maybe you'd grow into your looks, but honey, some people just aren't meant for certain things. You're built for work, not for catching a husband. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be. The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of Mama's clock on the wall. Maya stared at her hands, calloused and strong from years of ranch work. These hands had delivered calves in the middle of winter nights. They'd fixed fence posts and operated machinery and balanced books that kept food on the table. But according to her father, they were just the hands of someone who wasn't pretty enough for love. I'm going to check on the cattle, Maya said, standing up. Maya. Robert's voice stopped her at the door. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to protect you from getting hurt worse later on. It's better to know the truth about yourself than to go through life with false hopes. Maya walked back to the barn, her father's words echoing in her head. False hopes. As if wanting to be loved was some kind of foolish dream that women like her weren't allowed to have. She found herself in the barn office again, staring at the computer screen full of numbers that wouldn't add up right no matter how many times she rearranged them. The ranch was dying, and her father was too proud to admit it, too proud to let her help save it. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled through real estate listings. She'd been doing this for weeks, torturing herself with glimpses of what might happen if they couldn't make the payments. Other families living in her childhood home, strangers walking through Mama's garden, the cattle sold off to whoever would take them. A knock on the barn door made her look up. Lily stood in the doorway, still looking perfect despite the heat that was already building outside. Dad told me about the meeting with the Johnsons, Lily said, stepping carefully around hay bales in her clean white sneakers. He seemed pretty upset. When isn't he upset about something I've done? Maya replied, closing the laptop. Lily sat, down on a hay bale, an action that would have been unthinkable for her just a few years ago. Maybe she was growing up after all. Maya, can I ask you something? Lily's voice was softer than usual. Are we in trouble? Money trouble, I mean? Maya looked at her sister, really looked at her. Lily was 23, but sometimes she seemed much younger. She'd been protected from the harsh realities of their situation, allowed to believe that everything would always work out fine. Why do you ask? 3 weeks later, Maya was elbow-deep in engine grease when she heard the rumble of an unfamiliar truck coming up the drive. She wiped her hands on a rag and squinted through the barn door at the black pickup pulling to a stop near the house. The man who stepped out was tall and lean, wearing clean jeans and boots that had seen real work but weren't falling apart. Maya guessed he was somewhere in his early 30s, with dark hair and the kind of confident walk that came from owning land and making decisions that mattered. She watched him knock on the front door, then saw her father emerge to shake hands. Even from a distance, she could tell Robert was putting on his best behavior, the way he did when he thought someone might be important. Maya turned back to the tractor engine she'd been trying to fix. The old machine had been acting up for weeks, and they couldn't afford to hire a mechanic. She'd taught herself basic repairs from online videos, though this particular problem was testing the limits of her mechanical knowledge. "Excuse me, miss?" Maya jumped, not having heard footsteps approaching. She turned to find the stranger standing just inside the barn, his eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," he said with a slight smile. "I'm looking for Maya Rodriguez. Your father said I might find her out here." "That's me," Maya said, suddenly aware of the grease stains on her shirt and the fact that her hair was probably sticking up in strange directions. "Can I help you?" The man stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm Jake Collins. I own a ranch down in Wyoming, and I'm looking to expand my operation. Your father mentioned you handle some of the business side of things here." Maya shook his hand, noting that his grip was firm, but not the bone-crushing type some men used to prove their strength. His hands were calloused like hers, the hands of someone who did real work. "What kind of expansion are you thinking about?" Maya asked, wiping her hands again even though they were already clean. "Cattle operation mainly." "I'm looking for good grazing land, either to lease or buy. Your father said you might have some pastures available." Maya's heart skipped. This could be the answer to their financial problems if they handled it right. "Would you like to see the property?" she asked. "I can show you around, explain what we've got available." Jake nodded. "That would be great. But first, what's wrong with this old girl?" He gestured toward the tractor. "She's been running rough for weeks. I think it might be the fuel system, but I'm not sure. We can't really afford to have her down right now." Jake walked over to the tractor and peered at the engine. "Mind if I take a look?" Maya stepped aside, watching as Jake examined the machinery, with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent years keeping equipment running. He traced some hoses, checked connections, then reached into the engine compartment. "Here's your problem," he said, holding up a small filter. "This fuel filter is completely clogged. When's the last time it was changed?" Maya felt heat creep up her neck. I didn't know it needed to be changed regularly." Instead of the condescending lecture she expected, Jake just smiled. "These things aren't exactly intuitive. Do you have a replacement filter?" "I don't even know what size to get." "No problem. I've got some in my truck that should fit. This is a pretty common model." Maya watched in amazement as Jake retrieved a filter from his well-organized toolbox and installed it in less than 10 minutes. When he started the tractor, it purred like it hadn't in months. "How much do I owe you?" Maya asked. Jake waved her off. "Consider it neighborly courtesy. Now how about that tour?" As they walked toward the pastures, Maya found herself seeing the ranch through a stranger's eyes. The rolling hills that stretched toward the mountains, the creek that ran clear and cold even in late summer, the sturdy fences that she and her father had repaired just last month. "This is beautiful land," Jake said as they stood at the fence line overlooking their best pasture. "How many head are you running?" "About 150 right now," Maya replied. "But we could support more if we managed the rotation better." Jake turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Maya felt that familiar flutter of nervousness that came whenever someone asked for her opinion. But something about Jake's expression encouraged her to continue. "Well, if we divided this pasture into sections and rotated the cattle every few weeks, we could increase the carrying capacity by at least 20%. The grass would have time to recover between grazings, and we'd get better nutrition for the animals. Jake was quiet for a moment, studying the land with new interest. That's rotational grazing. Not many small operations use it effectively. I've been reading about it, Maya said quietly, but Dad thinks it's too complicated. It's not complicated, just different. And you're right, it would definitely increase productivity. Jake looked at her with something that might have been respect. Where did you learn about rotational grazing? Books, mostly, and some online courses. I try to keep up with new techniques. They walked to the next pasture, where Maya pointed out the natural water sources and explained the seasonal patterns she'd observed over the years. Jake asked thoughtful questions, and Maya found herself relaxing as she shared her knowledge. You really know this land, Jake said as they headed back toward the barn. I've lived here my whole life, Maya replied. My great-grandfather homesteaded this place. It shows. You can tell when someone has a real connection to the land they're working. They were interrupted by Robert's voice calling from the house. Maya, bring our guest up for some coffee. As they walked toward the house, Jake said quietly, I have to ask, that fuel filter problem? How long have you been maintaining the equipment yourself? About 5 years, Maya admitted. Since my mother passed away. We can't afford to hire mechanics for every little thing. But you're not trained in small engine repair? Maya shook her head, feeling embarrassed again. Maya, what you've accomplished here is impressive. Teaching yourself mechanical skills, managing the business side, implementing modern ranching techniques. That takes real intelligence and determination. Maya stared at him. She couldn't remember the last time someone had complimented her intelligence. On the front porch, Robert was setting out Mama's good china, clearly trying to make an impression. Lily appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of cookies, looking like she'd stepped out of a country living magazine. Jake, I'd like you to meet my youngest daughter, Lily, Robert said with obvious pride. She's the beauty of the family. Maya felt the familiar sting of the implied comparison, but Jake barely glanced at Lily before turning back to Robert. You've got 2 impressive daughters, Jake said. Maya was just showing me around the property. She has some excellent ideas about land management. Robert's smile tightened slightly. Maya's always been good with books and numbers, but she tends to overthink things. Actually, her ideas about rotational grazing are exactly what I've been looking for in a property, Jake said firmly. It shows real understanding of sustainable ranching practices. Maya felt a warm glow at Jake's words, but Robert was already steering the conversation in a different direction. So tell us about your operation in Wyoming, Robert said. How many acres are you running? As Jake talked about his ranch, Maya found herself studying him. He spoke with quiet confidence about his business, but he wasn't boastful. He asked Robert thoughtful questions about their operation and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. When Lily joined the conversation, Jake was polite but didn't show the immediate fascination that most men displayed when they met her. Maya had watched dozens of men forget whatever they'd been saying the moment Lily walked into a room, but Jake seemed immune to her sister's considerable charms. So what brings you to Montana? Lily asked, giving Jake her most dazzling smile. I'm looking to expand my cattle operation, Jake replied. My ranch in Wyoming is doing well, but I want to diversify into different markets. Montana beef has a great reputation. That's smart business, Maya said without thinking, then immediately regretted speaking up when she saw her father's warning look. But Jake turned to her with interest. You think so? Well, yes. Diversification reduces risk, and Montana has different growing seasons than Wyoming. You could potentially have cattle ready for market at different times of the year. Jake nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what I was thinking. Most people don't understand the strategic advantage of geographic diversification. Robert cleared his throat. Maya reads a lot of business magazines, he said dismissively. But reading about something and actually doing it are 2 different things. Maya felt her cheeks burn, but Jake's expression hardened slightly. In my experience, the people who understand business theory usually make better practical decisions than those who just wing it, Jake said coolly. The conversation grew awkward after that. Robert seemed to realize he'd somehow offended their potential business partner. while Maya tried to make herself invisible in her chair. Finally, Jake stood up. I should probably get going. I have a few more properties to look at this week. Maya's heart sank. Of course he did. He was a successful businessman with options. Why would he want to deal with a family that couldn't even agree among themselves? But, I'd like to come back in a few days to discuss terms, Jake continued. Jake returned 3 days later, just as he'd promised. This time he came prepared with a surveyor's map and a notebook full of questions that showed he'd been thinking seriously about their conversation. Maya was in the kitchen when she heard his truck pull up, and she felt her stomach do a nervous flip. She'd spent the last 3 days replaying their first meeting, wondering if she'd imagined the respect in his voice when he talked about her ideas. Maya, Robert called from the living room. Our guest is here? She took a deep breath and walked out to meet them. Jake was spreading papers across the coffee table, his expression focused and businesslike. I've been doing some research on rotational grazing systems, he said as Maya sat down. I think you might be onto something bigger than either of us initially thought. Robert looked confused. I thought we were here to discuss a simple lease agreement. We are, Jake said. But Maya's ideas could make this property much more valuable than a standard grazing lease. With the right management system, we could potentially double the carrying capacity of this land. Maya felt a warm glow at his words, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. She'd learned years ago not to get too excited when someone seemed to value her input. So what exactly are you proposing? Robert asked. Jake turned to Maya. Would you mind explaining your vision for the rotational system? I want to make sure I understand it correctly. Maya glanced at her father, who nodded reluctantly. She moved to the table and pointed to the surveyor's map. The basic idea is to divide each large pasture into smaller sections, she began, tracing areas with her finger. Instead of letting the cattle graze one big area continuously, you move them every 2 to 3 weeks. This gives the grass time to recover and actually encourages stronger root growth. Jake nodded encouragingly. And the benefits are? Better nutrition for the cattle, because they're always eating the best grass instead of picking over areas that have been overgrazed. Higher productivity per acre, which means more cattle on the same amount of land, and better soil health, which makes the land more valuable long-term. The initial setup costs would be significant, Jake said. We'd need additional fencing, water systems, maybe some equipment, but the long-term benefits could be substantial. Robert was studying the map with a frown. How much additional fencing are we talking about? Maya had been thinking about this for days. I estimate about 12 miles of interior fencing to create the rotation system you'd need for optimal results. 12 miles? Robert's voice rose. Do you have any idea what that would cost? Actually, Jake said calmly, I've been looking into that. With the right equipment and some hired help, we could probably do most of the work ourselves. I'm thinking this could be a partnership rather than a simple lease. Maya's heart jumped. A partnership? Here's what I'm thinking, Jake said, pulling out another set of papers. Instead of just leasing your land, what if we formed a joint venture? I provide the capital for improvements and additional cattle. You provide the land and local expertise. We split the profits based on our respective investments. Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the proposal. Maya could practically see him calculating numbers in his head. What kind of capital investment are we talking about? Robert asked. Jake named a figure that made both Maya and her father sit up straighter. It was enough money to pay off their mortgage and fund the improvements Jake had described. But there's one condition, Jake continued, looking directly at Maya. I want Maya to be the ranch manager for this operation. She understands this land better than anyone, and she has the vision to make this system work. Maya felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. Ranch manager? You'd be in charge of day-to-day operations, grazing schedules, herd management, all of it. I'd handle the business side and marketing, but the ranching decisions would be yours. Robert's face had gone through several color changes during this speech. Now hold on, he said. Maya's just a girl. She doesn't have experience managing a large-scale operation. With respect, Mr. Rodriguez, Jake said firmly, Maya has been managing your operation for years. The only difference would be scale and resources. That's different, Robert protested. This is a family ranch. Maya helps out, but making decisions for a business partnership? That's a man's responsibility. Maya felt something crack open inside, her chest. All her life she'd accepted her father's limitations on what she could do, what she could be. But hearing Jake offer her something she'd never dared to dream of made her realize how small her world had become. "Dad," she said quietly, "I think I could do this." Robert turned to her with frustration. "Maya, you don't understand what you're saying. Managing cattle is one thing, but handling business decisions, dealing with buyers, negotiating contracts, that takes experience you don't have." "Then I'll learn," Maya said, her voice growing stronger. "I learned accounting from books. I learned mechanical repair from videos. I can learn ranch management too." "This isn't a hobby, Maya. This is serious business." Jake had been listening to this exchange with growing tension in his jaw. Finally, he spoke up. "Mr. Rodriguez, I've been running a successful ranch for 8 years. I've worked with a lot of people in this business, men and women both. Your daughter has more natural understanding of cattle and land management than most people I've met with decades of experience. But she's never been given the chance," Jake interrupted. "There's a difference." The room fell silent. Maya could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, the same clock that had marked time through all the arguments and disappointments of her life. "I need some air," Maya said suddenly, standing up. She walked out the back door before anyone could respond. The barn had always been her refuge, and she found herself there without thinking about it. She sat down on a hay bale and tried to process what had just happened. Someone believed in her. Someone thought she was capable of more than keeping books and feeding cattle. But her father's words echoed in her head. What if Jake was wrong? What if she failed spectacularly and proved that Robert had been right all along? Footsteps in the doorway made her look up. Jake was standing there, his expression gentle. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Maya nodded, and Jake sat down on another hay bale facing her. "I'm sorry about that," he said. "I didn't mean to cause problems between you and your father." "You didn't cause anything," Maya replied. "This is just how things are in my family." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something?" Maya nodded. "When I was growing up, my father told me I was too small to be a rancher. Said I should go to college and get a desk job, because ranching was for big, strong men. He spent years trying to convince me that I wasn't cut out for this life." Maya looked at Jake, trying to imagine anyone thinking he wasn't suited for ranch work. "What changed his mind?" she asked. "Nothing," Jake said with a slight smile. "He still thinks I'm wasting my potential, but I stopped waiting for his approval and started proving him wrong instead." "That's different, though. You're a man. People take you seriously." Jake leaned forward, his expression intense. "Maya, I want you to listen to me carefully. In the 3 days since I met you, I've been researching everything you mentioned about rotational grazing, sustainable ranching practices, and land management. Every single idea you shared was not only correct, but advanced. You're thinking about ranching in ways that most people in this business haven't even considered." Maya felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. "My father says I overthink things." "Your father is wrong," Jake said bluntly. "And I think deep down you know that." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the barn windows. "Jake," Maya said quietly, "what if I'm not as capable as you think I am? What if you're taking a huge risk on someone who's going to let you down?" Jake smiled. "Maya, every business decision is a risk. But some risks are worth taking, because the potential reward is so great. This partnership could be successful with any competent ranch manager, but with you running things, it could be extraordinary. Why do you believe in me when my own father doesn't?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes the people closest to us are the least able to see who we really are. They get stuck on old ideas about who we used to be, or who they think we should be. It takes an outsider to see someone clearly." Maya thought about that. Her father had been telling her who she was for 26 years, telling her she was too plain, too awkward, too different to expect the same things other women took for granted. But maybe he'd been wrong about more than just her appearance. If I did this, Maya said slowly, if I became ranch manager, what would that actually mean day to day? Jake's face lit up. It would mean making decisions about when to move cattle, how to manage breeding programs, when to buy and sell. It would mean working with veterinarians and feed suppliers and equipment dealers. It would mean being responsible for the success or failure of a significant business operation. It sounded terrifying and wonderful at the same time. And you really think I could handle all that? Maya, you've been handling most of that already, just on a smaller scale and without anyone giving you credit for it. The only difference would be, 2 days later, Maya was checking the water systems in the north pasture when she saw Jake's truck coming up the road. But this time he wasn't alone. A second vehicle followed behind him, and Maya felt her stomach tighten with anxiety. She finished her work and walked back toward the house where she found Jake introducing a woman in a business suit to her father. The woman looked official and expensive with a briefcase and the kind of confidence that came from closing deals for a living. Maya, Robert called out as she approached. This is Linda Chen, Jake's attorney. She's here to discuss the partnership agreement. Maya felt a moment of panic. She still hadn't given Jake an answer about the ranch manager position, and now he'd brought lawyers. The whole situation suddenly felt very real and very intimidating. Actually, Jake said, catching her expression, I was hoping to talk with Maya privately first. Linda, would you mind if I showed Maya the preliminary agreements before we all sit down together? Linda nodded, settling into a chair on the porch. Take your time. I'll just review my notes while I wait. Jake gestured toward the barn and Maya followed him, grateful to be away from the formal atmosphere that had suddenly descended on their family meeting. I'm sorry for springing this on you, Jake said once they were alone. But I got a call yesterday about another property that's coming on the market. If we're going to move forward with this partnership, I need to know soon. Maya felt a flash of panic. Another property? A ranch in Colorado. Smaller than this one, but it's turnkey. Ready for cattle operation. No improvements needed. No complicated family dynamics to navigate. The implication was clear. Jake had options, and if Maya wasn't ready to commit, he could walk away and find something easier. I understand if you need more time to decide, Jake continued. But Maya, I want you to know that this offer isn't just about business for me anymore. Maya looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? Jake was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Over the past week, I've been thinking about what you said about rotational grazing, about sustainable ranching practices, about land management, but I've also been thinking about you. Maya's heart started beating faster. Me? You're not like anyone I've ever met, Jake said softly. You're brilliant and passionate, and you see possibilities where other people just see problems. When you talk about this land, your whole face lights up. When you explain your ideas, I can see how much you care about doing things right. Maya felt heat creeping up her neck. Jake, I know this complicates things, Jake said quickly. I know mixing business with personal feelings isn't always smart. But Maya, I need you to know that when I look at you, I don't see someone who needs to hide in the background. I see someone extraordinary. Maya stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do, Jake said firmly. Maya, you're beautiful. Not just smart, not just capable. Beautiful. And the fact that you don't see that makes you even more amazing. Tears sprang to Maya's eyes before she could stop them. Don't, she whispered. Please don't say things like that if you don't mean them. Jake stepped closer. I've never meant anything more in my life. But I'm not the kind of woman that men like you. What kind of woman am I supposed to like? Jake asked gently. Because Maya, you're exactly the kind of woman I've been looking for my whole life. Someone real, someone genuine, someone who cares about things that matter. Maya felt like her entire world was shifting beneath her feet. For 26 years, she'd accepted that she was the kind of woman who stayed in the background, who was valued for her usefulness rather than loved for who she was. And now Jake was telling her that everything she'd believed about herself was wrong. "Maya," Jake said quietly, "I'm not just offering you a business partnership. I'm hoping for something more personal, too." Before Maya could respond, Robert's voice boomed across the yard. "Maya, Jake, we need to get this meeting started." Jake smiled ruefully. "We should probably go back. But Maya, whatever you decide about the business, I want you to know how I feel about you." As they walked back toward the house, Maya's mind was spinning. Jake's words had unlocked something inside her that she'd kept carefully buried for years. The hope that maybe she could be loved for who she was, not despite who she was. Back on the porch, Linda had spread out several documents on the table. Robert was studying them with the careful attention of a man who'd learned not to trust legal paperwork. "The basic structure is straightforward," Linda explained as Maya and Jake sat down. "Jake provides initial capital investment for improvements and cattle purchase. The Rodriguez family provides land and local expertise. Profits are split proportionally based on the respective investments." "And Maya would be the designated ranch manager?" Robert asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Linda confirmed. "She would have full authority over day-to-day operations, with Jake handling marketing and business development." Maya could see her father struggling with the concept. Robert had spent his whole life making decisions about this ranch, and now they were talking about putting his daughter in charge of an operation that would be much larger than anything they'd ever managed. "What about oversight?" Robert asked. "What if Maya makes decisions that Jake doesn't agree with?" "The agreement includes provisions for consultation on major decisions," Linda said. "But operational authority rests with the ranch manager." Jake leaned forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, I want to be clear about something. I'm not offering Maya this position as a favor or because I want to be nice. I'm offering it because she's the best person for the job, period." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "Jake, I appreciate your confidence in Maya. But you have to understand this is a big risk for our family. If this partnership fails, we could lose everything." "Dad," Maya said quietly, "we're going to lose everything anyway if we don't do something." Words hung in the air like a challenge. Robert's face went through several expressions before settling on resignation. "Maya's right," he said finally. "The bank has been calling every day. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage and they're starting foreclosure proceedings." Linda and Jake exchanged glances. This was obviously news to them. "How much time do you have?" Jake asked. 30 days, Robert admitted. "Maybe less." "Then, we need to move quickly," Jake said. "Linda, can we expedite this process?" "If everyone's in agreement, we could have papers ready to sign by the end of the week," Linda confirmed. Maya felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. 30 days. After that, none of this would matter because they'd lose the ranch. "Anyway, I need to ask Maya something directly," Jake said, turning to face her. "Are you willing to take on the responsibility of managing this operation?" Maya looked around the table at the faces watching her. Her father, worried and desperate behind his attempt at stoic control. Linda, professional and impatient to get things moving. Jake, whose expression held encouragement and something warmer that made her heart skip. "Before I answer," Maya said slowly, "I need to know something. Jake, are you offering me this position because you think I can do the job, or because you feel sorry for me?" Jake's expression grew serious. "Maya, pity doesn't factor into business. Decisions worth this much money. I'm offering you this job because you're the most qualified person I've found. More qualified than men with decades of experience." "Experience doesn't mean much if it's just years of doing the same thing wrong," Jake said firmly. "You think differently. You see solutions where other people see problems. That's worth more than all the experience in the world." Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define the rest of her life. She could play it safe, let her father handle the negotiations, accept whatever Jake was willing to offer for a simple lease agreement. Or she could step forward into the unknown and claim the chance she'd never dared to dream of. "Yes," she said clearly. "I'll do it." Robert let out a long breath, and Maya wasn't sure if it was relief or worry. "There's one more thing," Jake said, pulling out another set of papers. I've had Linda draw up an alternative arrangement as well. Alternative? Maya asked. A purchase agreement, Jake said simply. Instead of a partnership, I'd like to buy the ranch outright. Maya felt her heart stop. Buy it? For enough money to pay off all your debts and leave your family financially secure. Maya would still be ranch manager, but you'd be free from the financial stress of ownership. Robert was staring at the papers like they might disappear if he looked away. How much are we talking about? Jake named a figure that made Maya gasp. It was more money than their family had ever dreamed of having. But there's a condition, Jake continued, looking directly at Maya. The offer is contingent on Maya agreeing to a long-term management contract, 5 years minimum. Maya felt like she was drowning in possibilities. A few weeks ago, she'd been desperately trying to figure out how to make the next mortgage payment. Now she was being offered financial security and a career opportunity beyond anything she'd imagined. Why would you pay so much? Robert asked suspiciously. Because this land is worth it, Jake said simply. And because Maya's vision for managing, it could make it worth even more. Maya stood up abruptly. I need some time to think about this. Maya walked back to the porch where Jake, Linda, and her father were waiting. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard, and she could hear the cattle calling to each other in the distance. This land had been in her family for 4 generations, but tonight it might change hands forever. I've made my decision, Maya said, settling into her chair with a confidence that surprised even her. Jake leaned forward, his expression carefully neutral, but Maya caught the hope in his eyes. I want to accept your offer to buy the ranch, Maya said clearly. And I want to be the ranch manager under a long-term contract. Robert let out a breath he'd been holding. Maya, are you sure about this? I'm sure, Dad. Maya turned to face her father directly. But there's something I need to say first. Robert's eyebrows rose at the firmness in her voice. For my entire life, you've told me what I couldn't do, what I wasn't good enough for, what I shouldn't hope for. You've made me believe that I was lucky to be useful because I wasn't the kind of woman who could expect to be valued. Robert's face began to redden. Maya, I'm not finished, Maya said, her voice steady and strong. I spent 26 years accepting your version of who I was supposed to be. But Jake has shown me something different. He's shown me that there are people in the world who can see past appearances to recognize actual worth. Now you listen here, young lady. No, Dad. You listen. Maya stood up, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was looking down at her father instead of up to him. I'm done accepting cruel words as truth. I'm done believing that I should be grateful for scraps of respect. And I'm done letting your fear limit what I can become. The porch fell silent except for the evening sounds of the ranch settling down. For the night, Jake cleared his throat. Maybe Linda and I should give you all some privacy to discuss this. No, Maya said firmly. They can hear this too. Dad, I love you, but your opinion of me stops being my reality right now. I'm going to take this job and I'm going to be excellent at it, not despite what you think of me, but because I finally see what I'm actually capable of. Robert was staring at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. Maya, I was just trying to protect you. From what? From believing in myself? From taking chances? From being disappointed? Maya shook her head. Dad, the only thing you've protected me from is my own potential. Lily appeared on the porch, drawn by the sound of raised voices. She took in the scene and quietly sat down, sensing that something important was happening. Maya, Robert said more quietly, you don't understand how hard the world can be on women who don't fit the traditional mold. I've seen what happens when people get their hopes up and then... And then what? Maya interrupted. They try and sometimes fail? They get hurt and pick themselves up and try again? Dad, that's called living. What you've been teaching me isn't protection, it's fear. Jake had been watching this exchange with growing understanding. Mr. Rodriguez, he said gently, may I say something? Robert nodded, looking shaken. I think I understand what you were trying to do. You saw a daughter who was different from what society expects, and you thought if you managed her expectations, you could protect her from rejection and disappointment. Robert's shoulders sagged slightly. She's my little girl. I didn't want to see her get hurt. But sir, Jake continued, by trying to protect Maya from potential pain, you've caused her actual pain, and you've deprived the world of getting to know an extraordinary woman. Maya felt tears starting, but these were different from the tears she'd cried over her father's words in the past. These tears came from relief, from recognition, from the overwhelming feeling of finally being seen. Maya, Jake said, turning to her, there's something else I need to tell you, and I want to say it in front of your family. Maya's heart started beating faster. What is it? Jake stood up and took her hands in his. I didn't just come to Montana looking for land. I came looking for a partner in every sense of the word, someone to build a business with, someone to build a life with. Maya, I'm in love with you. Maya heard Lily gasp softly, but her attention was completely focused on Jake's face. I love your brilliant mind and your gentle heart and your incredible strength. I love the way you talk to animals like they're your friends, and the way your eyes light up when you explain your ideas about sustainable ranching. I love that you see solutions where other people see problems. Jake, Maya whispered, hardly believing what she was hearing. I love that you're not like anyone else I've ever met. Maya, you're not beautiful despite being different. You're beautiful because you're different. You're exactly who I've been waiting for my whole life. Robert was staring at Jake like he was speaking a foreign language. You're saying you want to marry Maya? If she'll have me, Jake said simply, never taking his eyes off Maya's face. Maya, I know this is fast, and I know it complicates the business arrangement, but I couldn't let another day pass without telling you how I feel. Maya felt like her heart might explode from the combination of joy and terror flooding through her. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more in my life. Maya looked around at her family. Lily was practically bouncing in her chair with excitement. Robert looked like he was trying to process information that didn't fit his worldview, and Jake was looking at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever seen. Yes, Maya said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Yes, I love you too. Yes, I want to marry you, and yes, I want to be your partner in every way possible. Jake's face broke into a grin that transformed his entire appearance. He pulled Maya into his arms and kissed her right there on the porch, in front of God and her family and the Montana sky that stretched endless above them. When they broke apart, Maya was laughing and crying at the same time. Well, Linda said dryly, shuffling her papers, this certainly adds an interesting element to the contract negotiations. Everyone laughed, breaking the tension that had built up during Maya's confrontation with her father. Dad, Maya said, turning back to Robert, I need to know that you can accept this, all of it. The business arrangement, the marriage, everything. Robert was quiet for a long moment, looking at his daughter with new eyes. Maya, I owe you an apology, a big one. I spent so many years trying to protect you from disappointment that I never stopped to see how I was disappointing you. Dad, no, let me finish. Watching Jake look at you, listening to him talk about your intelligence and your capabilities, I realize I've been blind to my own daughter's worth. Maya, you're right. I was operating from fear, not love. Robert stood up and walked over to Maya. Honey, I'm proud of you. I should have been saying that every day for the past 26 years, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I'm sorry it took a stranger to show me what I should have seen all along. Maya hugged her father, feeling like a weight she'd carried her entire life was finally lifting. So, Lily said with a grin, when's the wedding? Maya and Jake looked at each other and started laughing. One major life change at a time. Maya said, let's get the business sorted out first. 3 months later, Maya stood in the same spot on the porch, but everything had changed. The ranch now carried the name Rodriguez Collins Cattle Company, and the rotational grazing system she'd designed was already showing impressive results. The morning had brought the news that their first quarter profits exceeded projections by 30%. Maya had spent the early hours checking cattle in the north pasture, now divided into the rotation sections she'd envisioned. The animals were healthier, the grass was stronger, and buyers were already expressing interest in their sustainably raised beef. Jake appeared beside her carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the easy smile that had become Maya's favorite sight in the world. "Good morning, boss," he said, handing her a cup. "Good morning, partner," Maya replied, accepting the coffee and the kiss that came with it. They'd decided to wait a year before getting married, wanting to establish the business partnership before adding the personal one. But Maya wore Jake's ring on her finger, and she'd never been happier to wait for anything in her life. "The Wilson Ranch called this morning," Jake said. "They want to tour our operation next week. They're thinking about implementing rotational grazing on their property." Maya smiled. Word was spreading about their innovative practices, and other ranchers were starting to ask questions. Maya had given 3 presentations to ranching associations in the past month, sharing her knowledge with people who treated her as an expert rather than an oddity. "Oh, and your father wants to talk to you," Jake added. "Something about the breeding program." Robert had surprised everyone by becoming Maya's biggest supporter once he got over his initial shock. He'd thrown himself into learning the new systems, and his years of experience with the land proved invaluable when combined with Maya's innovative ideas. The sound of a car coming up the drive made them both look toward the road. A familiar vehicle was approaching, and Maya recognized the reporter from the agricultural magazine who was coming to interview them about their sustainable ranching practices. "Ready for this?" Jake asked. Maya thought about the scared, insecure woman she'd been just a few months ago, hiding in the barn and accepting her father's limitations as